All right. Hi, eighth grade. It's really late on Thursday night, so I hope you don't mind that I'm kind of lounging as I'm making this video. All right. So we are going to be talking a little bit today and on Monday about thinking like a historian. And our main skill that we're focusing on right now is how are you determining the point of view of somebody who is writing a historical document. This is a little bit different than ELA because all of the documents that we are reading in social studies are nonfiction documents. And we have to think about the perspective in history that somebody has. Okay, so what is point of view? Follow along with me in your guided notes and fill it out as I read through this. So, point of view is the person telling the story, or it's the perspective of a text. And this is how to find the point of view. You need to ask yourself who is speaking. It's super important to know the author of the document because that tells you a lot of information about what they thought. And then you need to ask, how does this person feel? And then what do they think about the events that they're talking about? Finally, and this is probably the most important thing, go ahead and put a little star next to this line in your guided notes. Does this person have any bias about the event or the subject? Now, in case you forgot, bias is an opinion someone has in favor, for, or against one thing, person, or group, etc. Oh, excuse me. Oh, sorry. I always sneeze twice. I don't know why. I never sneeze more than twice. Okay. Bias is an opinion that someone has in favor, for, or against one thing, person, group, etc. Everybody has bias, and so that's why it's important to know who the author is, because it can give you a big perspective on what kind of bias they might have. I'm going to show you some examples here in a second, so if you're confused, don't worry. All right. All right, so why should we care about bias in social studies? So the main skill here is critical. Oops. Wow, this is a struggle today. The main skill here is critical reading, which requires that a reader recognize bias in writing. And without recognizing bias, you can become a victim of the writer's propaganda. And remember, we learned this word a couple days ago. Propaganda is like a bunch of exaggerated materials that's basically trying to manipulate you into the author's perspective. Okay? So, to identify bias in a passage or an article, the reader must read through the material and ask, what does the writer want me to think or do? And some genres that bias is present in is in editorials, advertisements especially, religious publications, and political materials. So an election campaign, a McDonald's advertisement, etc. All of these are going to have different kinds of biases that are trying to manipulate you, the audience. Here's a kind of funny comic that I thought is a good example of bias. Do you think President Obama is doing a great job, a wonderful job, or an absolutely terrific job? So look at this guy's face. And then this man is from liberal media polls. So he's going to be a Democrat asking about Obama. And obviously he's super biased because he doesn't even have a negative question here. This guy can only answer something positive about him. So clearly this man's bias is, right, that he loves Obama. Okay, so remember, these are our 3 questions that we're asking ourselves when we're trying to determine what is the point of view of the author. Who's speaking? How do they feel? What do they think? And do they have bias? So let's practice on a passage here. All right. The consequences of a speedy removal will be important to the United States, to individual states, and to the Indians themselves. The pecuniary advantages which it promises to the government are the least of its recommendations. By opening a whole territory between Tennessee on the north and Louisiana on the south to the settlement of the whites, it will incalculably strengthen the southwestern frontier and render the adjacent states strong enough to repel future invasions without remote aid. So, Andrew Jackson, the Indian Removal Act in 1829. So, let's talk about this. Who is speaking? Well, I just said it was Andrew Jackson, so we know it's him, and he was the president at the time. So, it's a man in power is speaking, the president. How do they feel, or what do they think about the events? Let's go back into the text. So we know he wants to remove the Indians, and how does he feel like that? About that? Well, he says a speedy removal of them, so getting them out of there quickly. He says it will be important. He says that there are going to be advantages to getting the Indians out of their territory. And he says it will make them strengthened and make the southern states strong enough to get rid of more Native Americans trying to encroach upon their lands. So, important advantages, recommendations, strengthen, and strong. These all sound like really positive words. Obviously, he's advocating for the removal of the Indians, and he feels very positively about that. Does he have any bias? Let's go back. It's an opinion he has. He's the president, and so we know that he's going to feel pretty positively about this removal act because he's the one that wrote it. He clearly does not think that the Indians are worthy of being citizens of the United States or worthwhile of being thought of as human beings. He just thinks it's good to repel them. All right. Our second passage. This is one from yesterday. Thus it is His Majesty's orders that the whole French inhabitants of these districts be removed, and I am through His Majesty's goodness directed to allow you liberty to carry off your money and household goods as many as you can. John Winslow, 1755. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, who's saying this? It's John Winslow from 1755. Yesterday, we talked about how this passage is about the Acadian removal. And let's look at some multiple choice questions. So, what is our author's point of view? A, the French inhabitants were removed because they had too many household goods. Let's go back into our passage. Is that true? Well, he's saying that they're allowed to carry, that the British are allowed to carry off as many household goods as they want, but it's not saying that they were removed because of that. So that's not right. B, the removal of the French inhabitants is necessary and desirable.